The grand chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with the voices of 200 species. Light from 3 suns filtered through the crystal dome, casting rainbow patterns across the polished stone floor. At the center table sat 5 humans, their faces showing the strain of 3 days of non-stop talks. James Walker rubbed his tired eyes. After 15 years as Earth's lead diplomat, he knew the signs of a failing negotiation. The Council had spent the last 72 hours explaining why humans needed to accept new protective limitations on their expansion. "The Council has carefully studied the matter," said Mox, the tall blue-skinned leader of the Council. His voice carried the artificial patience one might use with a child. "Humans will be granted 3 star systems for colonization. This is most generous." Walker looked at the data pad in front of him. Earth already had interests in 17 systems, with survey teams in another 12. The Council knew this. Everyone in the room knew this. 3 systems is not enough, Walker said simply. Humanity has 26 colony ships already built. Each carries 50,000 people. The Council chamber filled with dramatic sighs and clicking sounds of disapproval. "Your species builds too fast," said Trill, a reptilian representative. "You must slow down to match the proper pace of galactic development." Walker shared a look with Anna, his second in command. They had heard this argument for decades now. When humans first joined the Council, they were told to wait 50 years before starting their first colony. Earth had waited 5, then proceeded anyway. "Perhaps," said Mox, tapping his long fingers on the table, "we could allow 5 systems, but with Council supervisors stationed on each colony to ensure proper development protocols." Walker felt something snap inside him. Earth had followed this dance for too long. Every step forward required begging for permission from species who saw humans as dangerous children. He stood up suddenly. The movement was so unexpected that several Council members flinched. "Earth joined this Council in good faith," Walker said, his voice steady but cold. "We have traded fairly. We have shared medical advances. We have joined your defense patrols. Yet at every turn, we are treated as lesser beings." "That is not," Mox began. "I am speaking." Walker cut him off, something never done in Council meetings. A shocked silence fell over the chamber. "For 90 years, humanity has bent to your rules. We have compromised again and again. We have proven ourselves peaceful and cooperative. And still, you fear us." Walker looked around the room, meeting the many different types of eyes watching him. "You fear us because we move quickly. You fear us because we adapt. You fear us because in less than a century, we have accomplished what took many of you millennia." He gathered the data pads in front of him and slid them into his case. "Humanity is done negotiating from a position of weakness." The other 4 humans stood up, following Walker's lead. "What are you doing?" asked Mox, actual concern breaking through his diplomatic mask. Walker looked at him calmly. "Humans are leaving the table, Councilor Mox. Earth withdraws from these talks, and from the Galactic Council effective immediately." Gasps and translator-delayed exclamations filled the room. In the 90-year history of the modern Council, no species had ever withdrawn. "You cannot just leave," sputtered Trill. "There are procedures, protocols." Walker smiled for the first time in days. "Watch us." The 5 humans walked toward the chamber doors, their footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. Just before exiting, Walker turned back to the gathered representatives. "You've always underestimated humanity. That was your first mistake. Your second was believing we need your permission to exist in this galaxy." The doors closed behind the human delegation with a final, heavy thud. In the Council chamber, Mox regained his composure and waved a dismissive hand. "Emotional outbursts are typical of humans. They will return once they realize the consequences of isolation." He had no way of knowing that humans had no intention of being isolated at all. 3 days after the dramatic exit from the Council chambers, the human embassy on Centaur Prime began packing. No announcement was made, no press release issued. The staff simply started loading containers into transport ships under the cover of night. By morning, alien officials noticed the unusual activity. A council observer named Drell approached the embassy gates, where 2 human guards still stood at attention. "Excuse me," Drell said, his translator converting his musical language to standard Galactic Common. "Is the embassy relocating to a new building?" One guard looked at Drell with a neutral expression. "The embassy is closing. All questions should be directed to the council." Drell's eye membranes flickered in surprise. "Closing? But there must be some mistake. Embassies don't just close." The guard said nothing more, returning to his rigid stance. Across council space, the same scene played out at every human diplomatic outpost. Quiet, orderly withdrawal. No explanations given. By the end of the standard week, every official human representative had departed council territory. On the galactic trade hub of Nexus Station, Merchant Gill stood before his empty shop. For 15 years, he had sold Earth coffee, chocolate, and other human delicacies to wealthy aliens. Yesterday, his supply ship had never arrived. Instead, he received a simple message: "Final shipment. Thank you for your business." Similar notices reached thousands of trade partners across hundreds of worlds. Human goods simply stopped flowing into council markets. Medicines, entertainment feeds, specialized technology, all vanished from supply chains without warning. In the Council Military Coordination Center, Admiral Thomas disconnected her communication link after a brief conversation with her alien counterpart, Commander Zell. "You're pulling out all 12 patrol cruisers?" Zell asked, mandibles twitching in alarm. "The Outer Rim security grid will have critical gaffes." "I'm aware," Thomas replied calmly. "Earth Defense Force is repositioning all assets to protect human interests only. We recommend the Council adjust patrol schedules accordingly." The screen went dark, leaving Zell staring at his reflection. 6 days after the walkout, an emergency council session convened. The chamber, once orderly and procedural, now buzzed with nervous energy as representatives argued among themselves. "My world's primary medicine production has stopped completely," shouted the delegate from Vos, her translator struggling to keep up with her rapid speech. 3 major hospitals have already reported critical shortages. The humans are responsible for 70% of our deep space mapping," added another representative. "Our exploration teams are stranded without navigational updates." Mox stood at the center, attempting to restore order. "The humans are merely posturing. They cannot survive without council markets and protection." Then explain why they've recalled every ship, citizen, and business interest from council space, challenged Trill, who had begun to doubt his own earlier dismissal of human importance. At that moment, a junior aide rushed into the chamber and whispered urgently to Mox. The council leader's color darkened noticeably. "I've just been informed," Mox announced, his voice uncharacteristically tight, "that Earth has formally severed all communication channels with the Council. Their interstellar relay station has been dismantled and moved to an unknown location." Silence fell over the chamber as the implications sank in. "They've gone completely dark," whispered someone. Far from council space, beyond the edge of monitored territories, a convoy of human ships approached a small rocky planet orbiting a red dwarf star. On the bridge of the lead vessel, James Walker watched as they entered orbit. "Are you sure about this?" asked Anna, standing beside him. "Once we establish the new base here, there's no going back." Walker nodded, looking at the planet below, a world the Council had deemed worthless centuries ago and never bothered to claim. "Humanity isn't retreating," he said firmly. "We're just finding better friends." On his command tablet, messages flashed from 27 non-Council species, all accepting invitations to discuss a new type of galactic alliance, one without the Council's restrictive hierarchy. The silent exodus was complete. Phase 2 was about to begin. The planet had no official name in Council records, just a designation, RS-2347. But the humans called it Haven, and in just 6 weeks, It had transformed from a barren outpost into a bustling center of activity. In a freshly constructed meeting hall, James Walker stood before representatives of 27 non-council species. Some were familiar, races that had applied for council membership and been rejected. Others were from the outer reaches, species the council had deemed too primitive for galactic politics. "We don't offer you charity or protection," Walker explained, his voice carrying across the chamber. "We offer partnership, equal standing. Your voice matters as much as ours." A tall, insect-like being named Kren raised a limb. "The council said humans were dangerous, unpredictable. Why should we trust you?" Walker nodded at the fair question. "Judge us by our actions, not the council's warnings. Have we demanded your resources? Have we installed supervisors on your worlds? Have we called your ways primitive?" Murmurs spread through the gathering. Many had indeed faced such treatment from council members. "The Open Alliance has one simple principle," Walker continued: respect. "We may be different, but we are equals." In another section of the growing settlement, engineer Linda Reed worked furiously in her laboratory. Surrounded by equipment salvaged from a dozen human research stations, she made adjustments to a device that sat on her workbench. "Try it now," she told her assistant, a four-armed being named Dax, whose species had been denied council technology sharing for centuries. Dax activated the device. A holographic display flickered to life, showing real-time images from a planet 10 light-years away. "It works," Dax exclaimed, all four hands gesturing excitedly. Instant communication across 10 light-years without council relay stations. Linda smiled, though exhaustion lined her face after 3 days without sleep. "The council has controlled interstellar communication for too long. Their network was designed to be monitored, censored. This system is direct, secure, and can't be tapped. The breakthrough would change everything. Species who joined the Alliance would no longer depend on council communication networks that could be cut off as punishment for disobedience." On the military training grounds outside the main settlement, Admiral Thomas watched as soldiers from 15 different species learned to work together. Council military doctrine had always kept species separate, claiming biological incompatibilities made mixed units impossible. "Your natural armor makes you perfect for front positions," Thomas explained to a group of stone-skinned beings, "while the Telari can provide covering fire from behind with their superior vision." A young officer approached Thomas with a datapad. "Admiral, we've received word that 3 more mining colonies in the Varek sector want to join the Alliance. They've been paying protection fees to the Council for decades." Thomas nodded. "Send ships to establish a presence, but no aggressive posturing. We're there to protect, not intimidate." Back in the council chambers, the mood had shifted from dismissive to concerned. Intelligence reports flowed in daily, each more alarming than the last. "The humans have made contact with the Rathi Collective," reported a council intelligence officer. "They've been sharing agricultural technology that we classified as restricted." Mox paced the chamber floor. "How many species have joined this alliance?" "At least 30, with more expressing interest daily," came the reply. "And there's something else. We've detected unusual communication patterns. They seem to have developed a new form of faster-than-light communication that bypasses our network entirely." Trill slammed a clawed hand on the table. "Impossible. FTL communication requires relay stations. We control all relay technology." "Apparently not anymore," said Mox quietly. "The humans have done in weeks what our scientists said would take centuries." Outside the chamber windows, protesters had gathered, citizens of council worlds demanding answers about missing human goods and services. Signs in a dozen languages asked the same question: why did humans leave? The council had no good answer to give them. On Haven, as the first domes of a permanent city rose from the once empty plains, Walker looked up at the unfamiliar stars and allowed himself a small smile. The foundation was set. The next phase would reveal just how dependent the mighty council had become on the species they had underestimated for so long. 90 days after the human departure, the first serious cracks appeared in the council's facade of control. On the medical world of Belusian Prime, doctors gathered outside the planet's largest hospital, their faces showing a mix of anger and fear. "The human medications can't be replicated," announced the chief medical officer, her voice tight with stress. "Our scientists have tried. The molecular structures break down when we attempt to copy them." In the crowd, a mother clutched her sick child closer. Like thousands of others across council space, her daughter depended on human-developed treatments for a rare genetic condition. They had 3 weeks of medicine left. After that, no one knew what would happen. Similar scenes played out across 57 major worlds. The council had allowed, even encouraged, dependence on human medical advances. Now that decision was causing widespread panic. On the mining planet Doros, workers had stopped extracting valuable ores. Without the specialized human-designed equipment that made the dangerous work safe, accident rates had tripled in just 1 month. "We won't die for council profits," declared the mine leader as workers blockaded the main processing facility. "Either get us the human safety systems back or find someone else to mine your precious metals." The council responded by sending security forces, but the miners stood firm. News of the standoff spread to other resource worlds, where workers began their own protests. In the luxury towers of Centauri Prime, Council member Venus stared in disbelief at her financial advisor. "What do you mean? I've lost 60% of my wealth," she demanded. The advisor, a small gray-skinned being, shifted uncomfortably. "Your investments were primarily in trade routes and businesses that depended on human goods. Those markets have collapsed. Then invest in alternatives." Venus snapped. "There are no alternatives yet," came the quiet reply. "The humans didn't just sell products. They created entirely new market categories. No one else knows how to make them." Throughout council space, the economic ripples became waves, then tsunamis. Shipping companies went bankrupt as trade routes became unprofitable. Entertainment venues closed as human media, always the most popular across species, disappeared from circulation. Then came the first major political defection. The council chamber fell silent as the representative from Telos stood to address the emergency session. "For 200 years, Telos has been a loyal council member," he began, his voice solemn. "Today, that membership ends. We have signed a protection and trade agreement with the Open Alliance." Shouts of "traitor" and "fool" erupted from other representatives. Mox banged his ceremonial staff for order. "Telos will regret this decision when the human bubble bursts." The Telosian representative remained calm. "Perhaps, but my people are practical. The Alliance has offered us fair trade terms and security guarantees. The Council offers only promises that things will improve somehow." As he left the chamber, 3 other representatives followed him out, their own announcements of withdrawal already prepared. That evening, an emergency meeting of the Council's inner circle convened in a secure room deep beneath the main chambers. "The Alliance is offering asylum to any world that breaks from the Council," reported the head of intelligence. 7 more worlds are considering withdrawal. Trill, who had once dismissed humans so casually, now looked haggard from lack of sleep. "We must regain control. The Council has stood for 10,000 years. We cannot let it fall because of one upstart species." "What do you suggest?" asked Mox. "Economic sanctions. They've already cut all ties." "Diplomatic pressure. They ignore our communications." A military officer stepped forward. "There is one option remaining: a show of force. The humans have built their alliance quickly, but their military must still be scattered and disorganized. A decisive strike against their main base would remind everyone of Council power." Mox considered the option. It was extreme, unprecedented in modern Council history. But the alternative, watching the Council slowly crumble, was unthinkable. "Prepare a battle group," he ordered finally. "We will give these humans one chance to return to the fold. If they refuse, he left the threat unfinished, but everyone understood. The council was done with diplomatic approaches. The time for action had come. On Haven, as reports of the council's military preparations came in, James Walker received the news with surprising calmness. "They're doing exactly what we expected," he told Admiral Thomas. "Are we ready?" Thomas nodded grimly. "They have no idea what they're walking into." The Council battleship Eternal Order emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Haven system. Nearly 2 kilometers long, its polished hull gleamed in the light of the red dwarf star. Behind it, 12 support vessels formed a perfect attack formation. On the command deck, Captain Rule surveyed the tactical display with confidence. For 300 years, he had served in the Council fleet, rising through the ranks to command the most powerful ship in the Armada. "No defensive screen detected," reported his sensor officer. "Minimal orbital infrastructure. They've barely established a foothold here." Rule nodded, pleased. The intelligence reports had been correct. The humans and their pathetic alliance were unprepared for real military action. "Open communications," he ordered. "Let's give them their one chance to surrender." At the Alliance settlement on Haven, Commander Jack Parker watched the Council fleet's arrival on a holographic display. Unlike the tense atmosphere one might expect during an invasion, the command center remained calm, almost relaxed. "They've taken position at the system edge," reported a technician. "Standard Council formation, exactly where we predicted." Parker nodded. "And the defense grid? Powered but inactive. They can't detect it until it's activated." A communication alert flashed. "They're hailing us, Commander." "Put them through," Parker said, straightening his uniform. Captain Rule's alien face appeared on the main screen. "This is Captain Rule of the Council battleship Eternal Order *. The settlement on Haven is in violation of Council territorial claims. You will surrender your colony and return to Council space for rehabilitation." Parker kept his expression neutral. "This is Commander Parker of the Alliance Defense Force. Haven is unclaimed territory according to your own records. We have established lawful presence here." "The Council has revised its territorial claims," Rule replied stiffly. "You have 1 hour to begin evacuation procedures, or we will take action." The transmission cut off. Parker turned to his communications officer. "Make sure all Alliance worlds are receiving the feed." "Live transmission active to all 53 member worlds," came the confirmation. The hour passed quickly. On the Eternal Order Captain Rule prepared his fleet for what he expected to be a simple show of force. Perhaps they wouldn't even need to fire. Just the threat of the massive battleship might be enough to break the humans' will. "The deadline has passed," his executive officer noted. "No evacuation activity detected." Rule sighed dramatically. "Begin approach. Weapons at low power, enough to disable their main settlement's defenses." The Council fleet moved forward in perfect formation, approaching the small planet at 1/4 speed. At 50,000 kilometers from Haven, the first surprise came. "Captain," shouted the sensor officer. Energy signatures activating throughout the system. Small installations, previously powered down and invisible to sensors, suddenly appeared on the tactical display. Hundreds of them, creating a defensive web around the planet. Before Rule could issue new orders, 12 Alliance warships emerged from behind Haven's moon. They were smaller than the Council vessels, but their energy signatures indicated power systems unlike anything in Council records. "Detecting weapons lock from multiple vectors," reported the tactical officer, panic edging into his voice. On Haven, Commander Parker opened a channel to the Council fleet. "Captain Rule, your vessels have entered Alliance defensive space. Power down your weapons and withdraw." Rule's mandibles clicked in anger. "We will not be threatened by." "This isn't a threat," Parker interrupted calmly. "It's a final warning." Rule cut the transmission. "Target the lead Alliance vessel. Full power to forward batteries." The Eternal Order *''s main weapon charge, the energy building to devastating levels. But before it could fire, a series of small, fast-moving objects launched from the Alliance defense grid. "Incoming projectiles," shouted the tactical officer. "Impossible," Rule responded. "They're too small to be weapon platforms." The objects struck the Council vessels with surgical precision. Instead of explosions, they attached to hull plating. Then, all 12 Council support ships suddenly lost power, their lights flickering out. The Eternal Order itself shuddered as systems began failing throughout the massive vessel. Emergency lighting activated as the main power grid collapsed. "What's happening?" demanded Rule, watching in horror as his mighty battleship became dead in space. On Haven, Parker watched the disabled Council fleet on his display. "Targeted EMP devices," he explained to his officers. "No structural damage, no casualties. Just a complete systems shutdown." Within an hour, the entire confrontation had been broadcast across both Alliance and Council space. The mighty Council fleet, neutralized without a single shot fired or life lost. In countless homes, public squares, and gathering places throughout the galaxy, citizens watched in stunned silence as the unthinkable happened. The invincible Council military had been defeated with apparent ease. The myth of Council military supremacy, maintained for thousands of years, collapsed in a single afternoon. The Council emergency chamber had never been designed for shouting. Its perfect acoustic architecture carried every angry word to every corner of the room, creating a deafening storm of accusations and blame. "You assured us the military option would work," screamed the representative from Volus, pointing a trembling limb at Mox. "Now we look weak before the entire galaxy." The feeds of the Haven confrontation had spread everywhere. Council citizens had watched in shock as their mighty fleet was disabled without a fight. What was meant to be a demonstration of power had become a humiliation. Mox stood at the center of the storm, his usual composure cracking. "The humans use technology we didn't know they possessed. Our intelligence." "Your intelligence has failed at every turn," interrupted Trill. "First you said they couldn't survive without us. Then you said their alliance would fall apart. Now our fleet sits dead in space, being towed home by human ships." The double insult of defeat and rescue had been too much for the Council's pride. Captain Rule and his crew had been forced to accept Alliance help to return to Council space after their systems were disabled. Outside the chamber, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. On the wealthy core world of Ilium, protests had turned violent. Citizens demanded answers about medicine shortages, economic collapse, and the military defeat. "My world cannot survive another month of this," said the Nesian representative, her voice quieter but no less intense. "Our economy depended on processing rare minerals. The mining worlds have all stopped shipping to us since joining the Alliance." "Then perhaps Neja should consider where its true interests lie," suggested another representative coldly. The implication hung in the air. More worlds were secretly considering breaking away to join the Alliance. Mox slammed his staff against the floor. "Anyone who abandons the Council will be remembered as a traitor to 10,000 years of civilization." "Better a living traitor than a loyal corpse," muttered someone, not quite quietly enough. In the security control room below the chamber, Officer Dren watched the video feeds with growing concern. He had served the Council faithfully for 40 years, but had never seen such division among the leadership. "Sir," said one of his subordinates, "we're receiving reports of unrest in the diplomatic quarter. Several Council members' security details appear to be loading ships." Dren checked the spaceport cameras. Sure enough, staff from at least 6 diplomatic missions were quietly loading personal belongings onto private vessels. They were preparing to flee. "Who?" he asked. "The Telani, Vox, Jurians, Nesians." The list continued. These weren't minor members. These were founding species of the modern Council. Back in the chamber, the argument had devolved further when a communications officer rushed in, interrupting the session. He whispered urgently to Mox, whose color changed dramatically. The Concordat of Five has announced its withdrawal from the Council, Mock stated, his voice hollow. Silence fell instantly. The Concordat, five ancient, wealthy worlds that had bankrolled much of the Council's operations for millennia, had been the economic backbone of Council space. Without warning? Asked Trill, mandibles clicking in distress. They released a joint statement citing irreparable governance failures and economic mismanagement, Mox replied. They've already signed treaties with the Alliance. What followed was not panic but something worse. Resignation. Representatives looked at each other, the same thought evident on every alien face. If the Concordat had left, the Council as they knew it was finished. I move for a vote of no confidence in the current leadership, said a representative who had been silent until now. Hands, claws, tentacles, and various appendages rose across the chamber. The vote was nearly unanimous. Mox, leader of the Council for over 70 years, stood alone at the center as his authority crumbled. "You think replacing me will save you?" he asked bitterly. "The Council is dying. Not because of me, not even because of the humans, but because we forgot what we were meant to be." He placed his ceremonial staff on the ground and walked out of the chamber without another word. That night, as emergency ships evacuated Council officials from the capital, fires could be seen burning across the once perfect city. The Council hadn't just lost control of the galaxy, it had lost control of itself. On Haven, James Walker received hourly reports of the collapse with sober attention. "Did we move too quickly?" asked Anna, watching the news feeds of unrest spreading across former Council space. "We gave them a chance to change," Walker replied quietly. "They chose collapse over compromise." The question now was what would rise from the ashes of the once mighty Galactic Council. One standard year after humans had walked out of the Council chamber, the galaxy looked remarkably different. The great spires of the former Council headquarters stood empty on Centauri Prime, monuments to a fallen order. In their place, a new center of galactic governance had emerged on a neutral world called Terra Nova. Unlike the imposing Council architecture designed to intimidate visitors, the Alliance Concord building was a circular structure with open sides, allowing the warm breeze and natural light to flow freely through meeting spaces. Representatives from 87 worlds moved freely between discussion areas, no species given positions of greater prominence than others. In the main chamber, James Walker stood before the gathered representatives. His hair had more gray than a year ago, lines of exhaustion and responsibility etched into his face. "1 year ago today, humanity left the table," he began, his voice carrying across the attentive crowd. "We did not know then what would follow. We only knew we could no longer accept the old way." Many nodded in agreement. The former Council species, those who had joined the Alliance after the collapse, looked especially thoughtful. They had experienced both systems now. "Today we signed the Galactic Concord," Walker continued. "Not a treaty of dominance, but a promise of cooperation. Not a hierarchy, but a network of equals." On display screens around the chamber, citizens across 87 worlds watched the proceedings live. The new FTL communication network, developed by Linda and now expanded across Alliance space, made such real-time connection possible for the first time in galactic history. "The old Council believed stability required control," Walker said. "We believe it requires respect." They sought uniformity. "We celebrate difference." As he spoke, a small ship landed at the spaceport near the Concord building. From it emerged a familiar blue-skinned figure, Mox, former leader of the Council, now representing only his home world. Security officers escorted him to the chamber, where he stood at the entrance, watching Walker speak. The human's eyes met his across the room, but Walker continued without interruption. "Each world that joins our Concord retains its sovereignty," Walker explained. "Each contributes according to its ability and receives according to its need. We trade fairly, defend each other equally, and respect each other always." When the speech concluded, representatives lined up to sign the document, not in order of power or wealth, but simply as they wished. Some former enemies now stood side by side, finding common ground in the new arrangement. After the ceremony, Walker found Mox waiting in a small garden outside the chamber. "You look well, for someone who lost an empire," Walker said, offering a seat beside him. Mox sat slowly, his once proud posture now somewhat bent. "I did not come to trade insults," he said. "I came to understand." "Understand what?" "How you did it," Mox replied. "How humans shattered in 1 year what took 10,000 years to build." Walker looked out at the garden, where representatives from dozens of species mingled freely. "We didn't shatter anything, Mox. The Council was already breaking under its own weight. We just stopped pretending it wasn't." "My species ruled for millennia," Mox said quietly. "We believed it was our right, our burden to guide lesser races." "There are no lesser races," Walker replied. "Just different paths of development." They sat in silence for a moment before Mox spoke again. "My world votes tomorrow on whether to join your alliance. I opposed it, but I will lose." Walker nodded. "You're welcome to join. As equals, not rulers." "That's what I still don't understand," Mox admitted. "You humans could have taken control. After we fell, you had the power, the technology, the influence. Why create this concord instead of simply replacing us at the top?" Walker smiled slightly. "Because we didn't want to rule the galaxy, Mox. We just refused to be ruled by it." As the sun set on Terra Nova, ships from dozens of worlds filled the skies above the new capital. Trade vessels, diplomatic shuttles, and civilian transports moved freely through once restricted routes. Where the Council had built walls, the Alliance had built bridges. The galaxy had indeed lost control by the few over the many. In its place had grown something more chaotic, but also more vibrant. A true community of worlds, united not by force but by choice. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth that the Council had never understood. True stability comes not from controlling others, but from respecting them enough to let them control themselves.